Good day. My name is Kurt Wood, and I'm a senior fellow with the Center for Digital Government. And welcome today to this next hour of this webinar, Smoother Roads Ahead, Project Management Information Systems Services, Insights. And today we have some really wonderful guests that are going to talk about this really, impactful product and kind of the approach and technology that we're talking about here today. So today, on featured speakers today, we have Carrie Stieglitz, who's co-founder of Cavolvi, and I apologize, I messed that name up. Nicholas Johnson, Chief Evangelist, Kahua. Randall Iwasaki, President and CEO of Iwasaki Consulting Services. Sue Frost, Managing Director, Infrastructure and Capital Projects for Deloitte Transactions and Business Analytics. And of course, myself, the moderator. So before we get started, I'm going to have the folks give a brief background of who they are, just get some background. So I'll start with Sue. Sue, can you just give the audience a little bit of background of who you are, who you work with?
Yeah, it's great to be here, Kurt. Actually, last night I was at an offsite, and we had this new way of introducing ourselves of a list of words that describe ourselves and not my extremely long title that's on the slide. So I thought I would do that just to change it up. So I'm just going to list some names in words: mom, optimist, athlete, animal lover, DC resident, integrator, a corporate hippie. I should say a self-proclaimed corporate hippie. I am not an engineer, but I'm surrounded by them, and I'm a partner at Deloitte. I am leading our infrastructure and capital projects in the state and local and higher ed market. I do some work in the federal space because I am in DC and local is local. But our goal is really to help clients improve the impact and financing, procurement, delivery, and operations of your infrastructure assets, as well as other large capital projects. So it's great to be here.
Thank you and welcome. Appreciate it. Next up, Carrie, could you introduce yourself, give you a little background, please?
Sure. Carrie Stieglitz. I have about 17 years in the transportation sector. Fun fact about me, about 17 years ago was the first time I realized I should stop saying, in case I get hit by a bus. So we say, in case I win the lottery now. So that was my first introduction into the transportation sector. So my background is really focusing around people, process, and technology. I'm working with a lot of transportation agencies around making their processes better. And then today I'm representing kind of the history of what we've learned, trying to solve problems for folks in that space. And I'm really excited to share something that we've created with Kahua to kind of help with that.
That's great. Thank you. Appreciate that. And let me move over to Randy. Randy, can you give us a few minutes?
Sure. Thank you very much for the invitation to participate in this webinar. It's great to be here and back again with all of you. I'm a civil engineer. I started my career at Caltrans. I spent 27 years at Caltrans. I started as an entry-level civil engineer, and I left as the director of the department under Governor Schwarzenegger. But during that time in 1990, I was promoted to senior transportation engineer, and we started project management at Caltrans. We developed the Project Management Academy. We brought the project management manual, and also implemented Primavera. And in those days, Caltrans puts out over 1,000 projects a year, and so we're trying to resource load those schedules. And Primavera, and we'll talk a little bit more about data and data analytics, but the product would not do that. We had to export, and resource level and put it back in Primavera. But yeah, we only delivered 58% of the STIP in those days. And so the delivery record for the department has gotten a lot better. After that, I got recruited to run the Contra Costa Transportation Authority. I was the executive director there for a little over 10 years. And then I retired from the public sector after 37 years. And then I went to work for Amazon Web Services, which I led the transportation vertical there. They had just spun up a new vertical focused on transportation. So there was 8 sub-verticals, including DOTs and MPOs, airports, seaports, and others, transit agencies. And then most recently, I started my own business. So I do advisory services for companies. So it's great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and welcome. Let me turn this over to Nicholas. Nicholas, you want to give us a little background on yourself, please?
Sure, Nicholas Johnson. I'm the chief evangelist at Kahua. That means my job is to help share our story with the industry and bring your stories back to our team to help our team develop more and better products for you. Like Randy, I've been learning this industry for over 4 decades now. So I'll tell you a little bit about Kahua. We are the world's first low-code platform as a service project management information system. Why does it matter that we're low-code and that we're a platform as a service? Well, it makes us extremely flexible. I should probably caveat there are other big tools that are flexible, but the difference is that a low-code platform as a service can also be agile. So you can make the changes that you need rapidly, quickly, efficiently. The reason why is because low-code is easy to code. It's easy to develop. I want to overstate that, but gives us a great advantage over traditional software as a service. It gives us a great advantage over them. We are also the world's first PMIS that was FedRAMP authorized for the entire suite of our product line. I'm very happy to report that recently we've achieved state ramp authorization. We'll talk a little bit about what that means as we continue our conversation today. So we serve many of North America's largest transportation agencies. We also serve very small transportation agencies and clients of every project type. So I'm happy to be here with you folks today and glad we get to have this meaningful conversation about how we can help the transportation industry.
Thanks, Nicholas. I appreciate that. And just real briefly for the audience, again, I'm a senior fellow with the Center for Digital Government, recently retired Commonwealth of Massachusetts Cabinet Secretary and Chief Information Officer, spent 48 years in state government as a cabinet official the last 5 years, and certainly have an appreciation not just from a technology perspective, but really kind of the government operations. Certainly have an appreciation for the transportation industry within government. It's such a far-reaching service, and certainly critical infrastructure, and certainly experience about the amount of projects that and the amount of federal highway money and other federal funds and state funds and capital funds are invested in these transportation infrastructure projects. So, certainly this topic is relative today, that I'm very interested in hearing some of the newer approaches and some of the technology platforms and approaches to this most critical area. So panelists, thank you very much. I look forward to a good discussion. So Nicholas, we'll start with you. You spend a lot of times meeting with other construction executives out of Kahua. What are some of the common concerns that you're hearing from some of the leaders today?
Well, Kurt, I tell you that there's several things that I hear often. Perhaps there's one or two that bubble to the top most often. What I hear is that projects are increasingly complex. I think part of that is due just simply to the urbanization of America. Our transportation projects now are harder to start and they are harder to complete. When President Eisenhower created the interstate highway system, I think the projects began in 1956. Much of what we did then was greenfield construction. Today, very little of what we do would be in a greenfield. What we do now impedes on multiple owners' properties. It crosses multiple utility right-of-ways through multiple government jurisdictions, and most often in crowded urban areas. That's where our expensive projects seem to be taking place, and for good reason. Now, the construction itself is not changing dramatically, but the tools we use are. We're continuously incorporating additional new technology to improve the old ways that we've been planning and designing and monitoring quality on our projects. That new technology for safety probably has been introduced for every different worker profile, especially in light of the changes we made around COVID during that time. That technology, of course, comes with data. All new technology brings data with it. It all requires data to get started, and it all creates data. So construction owners are concerned about how to manage their data in a way that makes it valuable. So it doesn't just become another storage of unused documentation. But Kurt, I tell you, the two things I hear probably most often are around securing that data and keeping sensitive data, related to transportation systems, keeping it safe and secure. That's a growing concern. Our transportation system, of course, is critical to our national security. The interstate highway system that I mentioned before was created in part to move our military, but now it's also a critical part of our economy. And our entire transportation infrastructure, really rails, ports, airports, everything, that's critical to our economy and to our security. So the data we create in those projects can be highly sensitive and must be safeguarded. So the owners I talk to are increasingly concerned about their ability to prevent the next attack on their data and keep their own names out of the newspaper. But I'd say probably the thing that I hear most often is a concern around financial accountability. Because these projects that we talk about come with lots of financial strings attached, especially since the federal government began doling out the IIJA funds. The funding from state or local or those federal dollars that we talk about, even sometimes from private sources, each of these has strict requirements about how those dollars get used. And each of them has strict requirements about how we report back on how we use those dollars. So in this era of transparency, especially, with the introduction of this massive investment through the IIJA, I think that's kind of exacerbated the problem. So I know that's probably a long-winded answer, but I hope it sets the stage for what we talk about for the rest of this hour.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think the two foundational points there are critical. I think, certainly, with the amount of money invested, at a local, state, and national level, federal level, accountability, transparency. I think certainly in my role, in government all those years, those are, two of the foundational areas that, certainly we need to be aware of. We need to manage. Certainly on the security side, I think the more and more threats against our infrastructure, and certainly transportation is a critical component of our transportation infrastructure and to your point, national security. I agree. And I think, about the accountability, I know in my role, certainly, and government has a responsibility to be open and transparent. We are funded by, the taxpayers. And I know that's an old cliche, but at the end of the day, that's really true. I know in most, if not all administrations, there is a demand to make sure that, we're accountable, and there should be. And, we have scrutiny, we have, oversight from the legislature, we have, a town council or whomever it may be, or federal government in doing that. So I think, having that ability and having the ability to kind of track information, to know where things are at any given time. And I think to your point about the ability to output and report is critical. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Data is of no value if you can't pull it out and use it. I mentioned it before. If we just continue to use new technology to collect new data, we just create data stores. There's a serious problem that we created 25, 30 years ago when we began to digitize and digitalize our projects, and that we created massive stores of data. At the end of a project, typically, we put that data on a thumb drive or some sort of media. We turn it over to the owner, who puts it in a drawer or a filing cabinet, never to be seen again. And then we go and pay a consulting firm or a service firm to create a database to help maintain and operate the asset that we created, whether it's a utility or an airport terminal, whether it's a new road. We have to have data to manage those assets. And today, or previous, up until today, we haven't had the method to actually have that data flow directly in to what the owner needs to operate and maintain. Kahua's got a solution for that. Didn't really plan on talking about that today, but we call it asset-centric project management. And it's the ability to use the data as you design, as you plan, as you procure, and as you construct, in a way that the owner can immediately take advantage during operation of that data as soon as they take ownership of the asset, and even in planning before they take ownership.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, I think, certainly, in today's world with all the scrutiny and, accountability, which is needed, certainly having the ability to kind of manage that process and be available to answer the right questions, be able to respond is critical. We're gonna put a couple poll questions up right now for the folks and the audience. If you could take a couple minutes to take a look at this as we go through, and I'm gonna move to Randy for a second here. But if you can see which of the following describes your organization, if you can kind of fill it out, and we'll put this in the background in a second. Randy, you've also served in kind of the highest levels of government, with your experience that you've just introduced yourself to. Is there anything else on this list today that you can think about we should be talking about?
Well, first of all, I agree with what's been said. In the old days, it was a lot easier to deliver a project from planning through construction to user acceptance. I think to put in perspective, when I was the director, as I left in 2010, my annual budget was $14 billion, and we had 13 different fund types. It was mentioned before, but each of those fund types have rules and regulations. And so when I went to Contra Costa Transportation Authority, we would take all the federal money and put it on one project in the construction phase. So we'd federalize one construction project, and then we use local money or the sales tax dollars, which the board made up those rules and how we allocate those dollars. And we used it to hire consultants. We used it to do other things with to pave roads. And so there was less accountability. And I used to say that when you accept the federal dollar, you accept all the rules and regulations that go with it. And sometimes I remember during the Obama administration, there was the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. So that was a few billions of dollars that were allocated by formula to the cities and counties and the states. And one of our counties didn't want the money. It was so little, and there were so many regulations with it. And so I'm amazed today that we deliver anything because of all the rules, but that requires a lot of commitment to making sure you understand where you are in a project. Are you meeting all the requirements? Are your permits being upheld? And where are you with funding? And so you can report to your board or the citizens that you represent. And so it is getting tougher, but I think with new technology like PMIS systems, you're able to track these things more, and you get burn rates, and you're able to have better transparency with your bosses.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. I think, record keeping is so critical, especially when you talk about grant administration. It's very complex, and there are different rules. And what I've found in my experience is that each federal organization is a little bit different. So depending where the funds are drawn down, or the congressional act that authorizes the funding, or the state act that funds it, they have these different requirements based on kind of legislative mandates. So having that ability to navigate these areas is critical. So why don't we show the results of the first poll? So again, the audience here, you'll see comprised of owner, government entity is the lead here, other as well. So I think we have another poll question as well before we move on to Sue. So, and again, we'd like to just get a sense of the audience and what's your role within the organization. You can see, take a couple of minutes. Sue, Deloitte has an very impressive infrastructure advisory practice, but you personally have a particular interest in environmental aspects that Nicholas managed when he was talking about data use. Regarding environmental issues, what are some of the concerns at the top of the list that come to your mind? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, no, it's a great topic, especially as we're talking about compliance, right? And the uptick in that when we're already challenged from an infrastructure perspective to stay on schedule, on budget, and meeting those performance that we kind of set out to do. One thing that we haven't talked about yet that I'm hearing from transportation clients, infrastructure clients, teaming partners, grants management clients, and then also just here in Deloitte internally, is the workforce challenge, right? That's not new, right? Post-COVID, we know about the workforce challenge, but from an environmental compliance perspective, it is very specific. We cannot hire enough people, right? And then there's not enough people to hire. So how do you close that gap when, again, there's just not enough people out there to actually do the work and keep up with compliance, which I am concerned impacts performance, right? So, a few things that are kind of top of mind to think about. One is just making sure environmental compliance is addressed, not in a functional silo, right? It's integrated across all operational departments. Two, there's a framework and workflows, right, to help manage decision-making as well as to identify accountability. And then three, kind of what we're talking about today, is around the integration of technology, right, to record, monitor, and help communicate that data to get in the right hands so that you can identify, escalate, and then resolve, any risk that comes from the environmental side. I'm hopeful, right, that over the next few years, we see that technology will help close that gap that we're seeing on the environmental compliance side.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And I just, just add in there for color, in my experience, prior to being a cabinet secretary, I was an undersecretary of public safety, but I oversaw the statewide public safety radio system. Big infrastructure project. And, when you talk about environmental, the dependencies, I think, the interdependencies on other government agencies, specifically transportation, who own the roads or some of the land and things of that nature, having that ability to, again, navigate the bureaucracy within government with the different themes. And of course, certainly, a lot of the regulatory framework that exists in government projects, especially around environmental, is critical. And I think, having that ability to kind of have that information, to be able to express that information, be able to kind of demonstrate, that you have a plan, that you have thought this through is critical. So I think it's a great point that you brought up there. Nick, do you want to add to it? Nicholas, do you want to add to that at all?
Yeah, Kurt, I wanted to just mention that we hear the same thing, the same concerns that Sue raised from our non-transportation clients as well. So this is not unique to transportation. It is a huge concern to transportation. We're especially sensitive because transportation is a huge environmental impact on our culture and on our climate. So we're probably more sensitive here, but we hear it from all of our clients. In fact, it comes to mind our mission as a company is to enable the industry to innovate. We can't do everything for everybody, so we've built a platform that people can create for themselves on, if you will, and a partner community that will help you do that. An example that comes to mind is our client, the GSA, has created a suite of tools to help them track embedded carbon in all their project use. So just a simple thing that we've talked about doing for so long. Now they have the ability to actually know what their environmental impact is as they plan and design and procure and construct. That's just one good example. We want to be able to help people innovate for themselves. So I think that's part of our mission there.
Let me follow up a little bit to you as well, and we'll show the results in a minute for the latest poll. But we talk about environmental, but more and more conversation comes around climate, and sometimes there's a different perspective of depending where you sit. Are you seeing your customers, your clients, kind of separate the two or demand a little bit different approach, or do you kind of bucket this the same, or especially around project manager or accountability, or kind of, because there's different initiatives throughout the country today. I know here in Massachusetts where I'm at, there's a new climate czar, but you still have environmental, and it's kind of married at the hip, or merged at the hip, but it's still kind of a separate function. Do you see that at all today?
I think they are married. I think they are merged, as you said, merged at the hip. But there are separate individual elements of that. Carbon tracking is just one of those elements. Reuse of materials is another great one. That another one of our transportation clients is now tracking. So, I think there is a kind of a big picture and there's a micro pictures for each one. Yeah. And I bet that the rest of our panel would have some input on that as well.
Great. Can we show up the results? So now here's the second poll. You can see kind of the folks that are part of the audience here, what role they're at. So let me move on to Carrie. So Carrie, you work in this industry, certainly from a technology perspective, and kind of where do you see this going? And what is the go-to from a technology perspective as you think about overall, kind of doing this, the project management and kind of the approach to what we're talking about today?
Yeah. Well, we've definitely seen the technology change over the years. So what I would say is when we're looking at technology and we're trying to pair that with the client need, one of the things we look at, and actually I have an analogy here, it's the level of how much you can change the technology once you get it. So, we kind of liken it to construction. Have you guys ever seen construction sites and there's those prefab trailers that they just go and plop on site? And those are really fast, easy to do, right? They're already built out. You can get them going really, really quickly. And then the opposite of that would be like a very complex custom home build, you would spend a lot of time designing it, engineering it, and it can be 1 to 2 years before you actually pour your concrete foundation. But once you pour your foundation, you're set, right? You're locked into your design, and everything kind of builds up off of that. One of the things that I've been interested in lately is, which I think is a great analogy, is the concept of Lego blocks for building houses. So especially recently, they're real life Lego blocks, and they're a really exciting new technology where you can kind of get that great in between of, putting the blocks in, you can go faster. A lot of it's pre-built for you, but you still get a lot of ability to kind of structure and restructure that house as you go. So not as restrictive as the other one. And I feel like when you go to look for technology, you're going to want to experience that. So some of the technologies in the marketplace, you can get them set up within a month. But really, once it's set up, it's done. You don't get a lot of choices. Maybe you can change the paint. And then, the other side of the house being these custom technologies that were built from the ground up. So transportation organizations could choose to build those, themselves. And of course, it would be, every spec would be exactly how they wanted it. But the time and energy that it took to get there and maintain it, and how they were kind of locked in, was something that we saw a lot, where they're wanting to do something different, but the decisions had kind of already been made, and they were stuck with that. And so part of the reason that we've really invested in our partnership with Kahua is to kind of take that Lego block approach to technology, where we can pull in bits and pieces of what works for every specific client without having to have the whole package preset. Another really great thing that we love is it is a platform. So because it's a platform, it works a lot like your Apple iPhone, where you can have different folks developing different apps that sit on top of that. And so when we have that, we have the ability to also have, the Apple platform is great. They have some apps out of the box that you can start using right away, but you can also build your own apps. And so that's another really great feature. And why we specifically have invested in Kahua as a technology solution.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I think, we kind of don't think about that at times enough. And I think certainly, leveraging today's modern platforms, and you talk about, platform as a service, and you think about that analogy with the iPhone or a smartphone, I think is just tremendous. And I think, people like to have that technology in the hands. And I think, another area that we talk about is really agility, right? Think about, you got to do things quick today. I think your point about, building something quick within a month, because I know in my experience in government, we could take a long time to kind of figure things out, right? And we can debate that to death and try to get to that 100% perfection. In reality, that's not how the real world works. And I think, especially around schedules and budgeting and meeting deadlines and deliverables, especially on a construction project, are critical to success, right? Both from a client perspective and certainly from the construction industry itself. So having that ability of the technology. Let me just do a quick follow-up. Carrie, do you see the industry, do you see from a client perspective, do you actually see the adoption by the customer? Are they getting it? Do they understand it? Are they appreciating kind of the modern approach to things here?
Definitely. So one transportation client we worked with, we did stand them up within 60 days. So still a very quick stand up with Kahua. But the adoption of it, I think, is the acknowledgement that they do have that flexibility moving forward. So we don't have to spend so much time and energy with them up front, knowing every single little detail, because that agility and flexibility, we can have that day one, but we can also change the design later as kind of they learn more about it. And then just to speak on that for a second too, a huge shift that we've seen is actually transportation owners investing in that software, right? Because it is more accessible, because they keep and own the data after the fact. That's a huge shift that we've definitely been seeing, where it's more accessible for them to have a tool that works really well, the day they purchase it. And so they're investing more and more into that. And that gives the added benefits of everything else we talked about, right? Cost transparency. We're not talking about all of their project data existing in a contractor system. They actually own that data. And because it's so accessible and they can get it stood up quickly, they have access to that now. So we're definitely seeing that trend.
Yeah, I see that as a home run, honestly. I mean, I think about, the potential, and where that goes, and, how it works from a government perspective is just tremendous. Sue, from your practice, do you have anything to add? Any thoughts on that you want to add?
I'm laughing because I'm invested in Kahua because of Carrie. when I met her when I was working at PwC years ago, to this day, if it's around technology, transportation, and business process improvement, like, she's on the team, period. So I'm a big fan. So there's not much I can say to kind of, follow Carrie, except just to kind of to focus in on that of, like, it's a quick win, right? So, like, if you, from a technology perspective, the ability to get up in 60 days, to Carrie's point, is a good win from an adoption perspective. But then there's the long-term commitment that comes along that I think is unique to this platform. I haven't seen many organizations be as involved in the market, really talking to clients and understanding them, talking about their products, and not just letting us talk about their products for them. And so I think you can see that in the platform, and it just doesn't go stale at this point. So it's, I think that's important for our clients going forward.
You just made a comment there that was just, to me, just hit home. It doesn't get stale, right? Because I think that's one of the challenges, at least in my experience in government. Things, we tend to invest in things and we buy it once and we put it on the shelf. We never extend it, right? we'll just buy something else, right? If that didn't work, we'll just get something else, versus actually that approach today to kind of be adaptive and adoptive, and to kind of to iterate, and to improve on again, use the term platform, but I think that's a tremendous observation. I appreciate that so much.
And I think it's a negative feed loop, right? You're right. We keep buying new products to solve the problem we were trying to fix a couple of years ago, but we might have picked the cheaper product up front to do that. And then, it builds up over time, and it's a huge investment. So it's a challenge.
And people tend to hold on to what they like and everything like that. So, Nicholas, do you want to jump in there?
Yeah, if I can just tag to what Carrie's analogy, it's really more of a comparison than an analogy, because your iPhone is a platform as a service, as is my Android. And to your point, Kurt, and to Sue's point about it not being stale, it seems like every week I add a new app to my phone. I don't know what I do with all of them, but I keep adding apps because I got a new vehicle, so now I add an app every week for a new charging station somewhere. So I love that. Like you said, Kurt, I love what Sue said. It doesn't get stale.
Yeah, I just think that is such a, it's such a point. It's just spot on about kind of, what it is, especially in government, right? Or in these type of environments. So, Randy, let me get back to you for a minute. Somebody that's been around government, for a long time, like myself, and we know that, things change rapidly for multiple reasons. It could be crisis. It could be change of administration. It could be lack of funding. Can you kind of talk about that kind of, around the project management aspect of things, kind of how to manage that environment, and kind of what you see today, from the platform and the technology approach?
That's a great question. I think that as project delivery gets more complex, you need better tools to help you analyze the risk midstream. Specs change midstream. Standard plans will change, and you're going to have to make adjustments, and yet you've got a schedule that you've committed to and a budget that you've committed to. And I think project management tools like Kahua, what interests me when I first started working with them was you go from programming, and we've talked a lot about construction, but we also get into operations. And so if you think in terms of a project management tool that allows you to track changes throughout the process, but also identifies those key elements that you want to integrate into your asset management program, it does that seamlessly. And so, yes, I love to build stuff. I've spent a career building things like the Bay Bridge and all that, but I also ran maintenance for the state. I was a state maintenance engineer, and you have to worry about maintaining your assets. It goes beyond just bridges and roadways, but it could be your servers, it could be your IT systems, it could be your software as a services. You got to stay on top of all that. And I think tools that allow you to do that make you more adept and more nimble and making those adjustments when life changes or the project delivery process changes, or you have differing site conditions in construction. And so you can maintain that. One of the things I did when I was at Contra Costa Transportation Authority is I went paperless in the project delivery process. I asked the team to do that. And so we did online bidding. That was to reduce the risk of protests and things like that. So we tracked keystrokes. You couldn't change the items, the quantities, but you could put your own dollars. You have to put percentage subcontracting. The system would alert you made an error, an unwaivable error. And so really reduce the amount of protests. So these processes that when you start digitizing them, you're going to get more information, but you're also going to be more adept and more nimble at making changes when you have to, versus you find out later it's too late to make changes and your schedule is affected and your budget's affected.
Yeah, I mean, your point there, I think back to, some of my experience as well. And, certainly, having that ability to, manage the process. And you talk a lot about maintenance. And I think, again, at least in my experience over the years, that's an area that is, kind of under considered at times, right? We tend to kind of live in the moment at times and, get these big projects, but you need to kind of think about that. And I think the point I take from that is that you got to look at the bigger picture. You got to look at all the pieces and parts and how they work. And I think, especially around project delivery, but there's an aspect of actually, the operation side of the house, right? And the sustainability of these systems and understanding, where things are, even from an asset inventory perspective, to know where things expire, when warranties come off, when maintenance has to be done. Transportation is a perfect example, but they're certainly out throughout government. I think it's probably one of the areas that we still struggle with at times. And I think, certainly having, automation, having, technology and a process there, I think is critical to your point. So I think that's
well, you have to go in the state government. We zero base the capital program,
right?
And by phase, and so every year you've got to go back to the legislature and you've got to ask for more resources.
Exactly.
And so as your program, we're just talking one project now, but when you think about a suite of projects and you bind all that information, all those projects together, and you start resource loading across fiscal years to try to come up with a stable staffing number, it is tough. And with these new project management tools, they resource level that for you.
Yeah, and just trying to report out on the project and maintain that project and be able to, unfortunately at times you have to justify that project every year, right? You have to be able to demonstrate to people that you actually have a handle on it, especially with our state legislatures and governing bodies and things of that nature, oversight groups. So spot on. So we're going to, before I jump to Nicholas here, I'm going to do another poll question here. If we can pop that up. Again, if you can see it, do you currently have a PMIS in place for your transportation projects? And then Nicholas, I'm just going to touch base with you for a second on kind of real focus here on Kahua. Can you share an example in time when a current tech stack enabled an organization to do something brand new? I mean, kind of how do you think about that? Can you give us an example?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you how I think about it. Randy, kind of sent a shockwave through me because I'm an old design engineer early in my career, and he said the words, specifications change.
Yeah.
They're not supposed to change once the project has started, but Randy was a great point. They do sometimes change. And Kurt, you said sometimes the administration changes, which means the priorities change. So
exactly
the tools that Kahua creates, or that any vendor creates, the tools that we put in the hands of our constructors and our design teams, our planners, they need to be agile, and we need to be able to make those changes in our tool sets and create new things as new requirements come up. So you asked for an example, and I mentioned earlier, embedded carbon. The GSA now wants to track embedded carbon, so they track embedded carbon. I think I mentioned that there is one of our partners created a tool to track through all those funding sources on all those different projects at every different level for every different line item. We can track the percentage of XBE participation, minority and disadvantaged businesses. Those are great examples of adopting to something that has become a pressing concern. I think about, in this conversation, I think about one of our partner companies, Superset, has created a suite of tools to help manage the unique challenges of a P3 project. Because when you do a public-private partnership, and we seem to be doing many, many more of those now because of our economic climate, When you do a P3 project, there's some unique challenges to how you govern that project and how ownership of information happens. So Superset created a suite of tools for P3 projects. But maybe an even better example, Carrie is doing something similar to create a suite of tools specific to the challenges of a transportation project. And I don't know, Carrie, if you could maybe talk about that a little bit, share a little bit about what you've done there.
Just want to show real quick the results here real quick. And again, you guys and gals can take a look at that at your leisure. But yeah, Carrie, can you provide us some more information? Very interested in hearing this.
Yeah, definitely. So one of the things that I wanted to kind of cover is again, going back to working with different transportation clients and trying to solve those problems. So when we really turned our attention to Kahua, maybe 2010, what we said was, this is this great opportunity to build out some of these applications, some of these Lego blocks that could sit on them. And so when we thought to build that out, we really were looking at what are all the problems that we had when we were working previously with transportation clients that we couldn't solve. And one of those was really around the space of the uniqueness of transportation projects in their horizontal and spatial component to that. So Nicholas mentioned earlier that we're working across a lot of different counties and cities. We have a lot of moving parts. And so the component of Kahua doing the vertical very, very well, having the Sources of Funds app that enabled, one of the best in the marketplace, in my opinion, to manage the funding component of it. So what we really focused on is, okay, what's left? What can we build out that would really be focusing on that? So the transportation delivery piece of it, we're talking about environmental permitting, some of those things that we talked about earlier that are unique to kind of that horizontal or linear component of construction. Also programs. So a lot of transportation, there's early programming, there's a 10-year transportation plan that they participate in their individual regions. And so long before a project is even ready to start, the programs are conceptualized of what we're going to be doing within our regions and how we're going to solve transportation needs specific to population growth, new routes, retiring routes, modifying routes. Also with STIP, or the Transportation Improvement Programs. So there's a component of our capital plan that we typically have, and then transportation has a subset of that gets different funding sources, snapshot in time, different reporting requirements. So how do we delineate every project from something that might be in our STIP? Also right-of-way. So right-of-way is one of those problems that I think everybody has, especially a lot of the transportation agencies and DOTs now also own buildings. They have buildings, land, leases. So it's not just transportation, right, that they're delivering with. They're also owners of assets that they need to manage. And then the spatial asset component of it too, typically represented in your GIS solution. And then just kind of bringing that full circle, the theme that we've had today is also the operations piece of that, right? So not only do our capital projects deliver new assets, but they also modify existing assets a lot of times. And so when we look at the particular asset condition, or we're out there doing a survey and we recognize that, hey, this particular asset may need some repair in the next 5 years, that link all the way back to the capital plan. So really what we've been working on is kind of providing a way to look at that and also capture data. So in the technology, we capture the data, but really a big component of that is solving business problems with data. So the visualization component is going to be really important moving forward. So being able to combine it with Esri overlays, as an example, with population growth projections or current, or for some folks overlaying that with crash data information so that you can see this particular intersection, the crash data. We've had a lot of issues with it lately. That might go higher up in the improvement plan than an intersection that maybe hasn't had as much But until you get all of this data that's all, potentially in different systems, and you combine it into a visualization component, it's really it's harder to understand how the data interacts. But with the ability to add in the visualization, really beginning to understand how all this data can come together centralized on an asset or a mile marker X, Y. So being able to see all that information together. And really, again, the end result is all the things we're doing now, but trying to bring it into one system that's extremely flexible, that's going to be giving you some of those benefits of investing in a system. And really, overall, the reason we do that is to make better business decisions and, use our funds appropriately and prioritized in the right way. So we're really excited to be bringing these apps to the marketplace, and we're really excited to be doing it on Kahua because we think they're the innovator in the marketplace right now. Their rate of growth is beyond everything else that we've worked with, and we've pretty much worked with all the technologies out there.
That's great. I tell you, again, just listening to you speak and talk and evangelize here, but I think when we think about data-driven decisions, and certainly in my experience, I come from a public safety background. We've been doing that for many, many years. It's equivalent when you mentioned crash reporting. I've been involved in projects with the highway before and that. And it's so critical because, again, and it's been such a challenge to kind of assimilate all that data and be able to kind of present it. And to your point about visualization, when you can show somebody a slide, that you can show, a graph that they can read, they can understand, they can consume without having to read 30 pages, right? I mean, that's as I mentioned, that's a home run. So that's great. And, to have that ability to have a platform, to have the app and the tech to be able to do that and have it at the fingertips, of the user, of the person that's running the project or the financial person, if they want to look at something, and having that ability and that extendability is just tremendous. That's excellent to hear. That's really good to hear. I'm gonna ask to put up another poll real quick and take a look, folks, if you could answer that. And then I'm going to just move off to Randy and Sue, and just to follow up what Carrie talked about. We talked a lot about data, and I know that, at the end of the day here, data is really the crux of everything here, to be able to make sure that we have the data, to your point about making better decisions, informed decision-making, things of that nature. But Randy and Sue, I'll start with Randy. What about some of the challenges? Because again, I know in my experience, we always talk about governance, right? Data governance, and then everybody has their own data. You might have a highway department has it, Department of Motor Vehicles might have it, environmental might have it. And, at times, government's tough. They don't like to share data at times. How do you navigate that? Certainly with the platform and the tool, it's doable, but how do you kind of think about that when you kind of work with your agencies? I'll start with Randy.
This question reminds me of when I was working at Amazon Web Services and trying to move agencies into the cloud and talking about data mapping. Yep. And we just throw the word data out, and it's going to solve all our problems. We have all this data, but the problem is you have data silos that are all over the department. It could be all over state government, as you mentioned. Right. The Department of Motor Vehicles is integrated into the tolling systems that make sure that the right toll gets charged to the right owner of the vehicle. And it's different formats. And so when we think in terms of, and I look back on my career, I was walking as I graduated from Cal Poly. And as I was graduating, I was interviewing for a job with a company called Castler. And they were putting the second story on LAX. So I was walking on the false work. And now they've rehabilitated LAX a couple of times since then. That's how long I've been in the business. But that was all done with paper. And so when you think in terms of as-builts and how do you integrate PDF format, digitized format, and then blend that together, and we complain a lot of times that we don't have enough information. So when we're building the interchange here at 684, we were putting down boreholes trying to figure out what's down there. And yet the previous projects in that area did the same thing. And yet we don't have an understanding because we don't have a common format or a platform to store all that data and then to analyze that data. And lastly, I would be remiss if I didn't mention this, but as we move toward homogeneous data sources, we're on the same platform, we're digitizing the project delivery process, including construction inspection. We're setting our future program up for the younger people to recruit. There's a lot of competition for youth. I was part of the transition between ink and vellum to CAD. And the old timers still made me run a planimeter, make sure the cross sections that were computer generated were accurate. Well, they were more accurate than I could run a planimeter on, but they just didn't trust it. But I think as you transition over to new ways, new technologies of doing business, I think it's going to make the recruiting of the young people a lot better, or get them excited at least into going to engineering or construction management, things like that.
I think that's such a great observation. I think, I've certainly experienced that myself, and, to be able to kind of retain or recruit and retain, folks, and you need to make sure that you have the appropriate tools, because people, that's what they work with today, right? They don't, it's, us old times, it's, we have to be the champions. I know we kind of hang on to stuff, but, preparing the workforce for the future is critical. I think that's a great observation. I think that doesn't go, it doesn't get noticed, or it doesn't get talked about enough. So I appreciate that, Randy. Sue, from your perspective, you want to kind of add anything to that from a thought perspective?
Yeah, I would just mention that there's a lot of data, right? There's a lot of data silos, and the integration is challenging. But I also think we sometimes get lost in the data. More data doesn't mean better decisions, right? And then how do you manage the data quality around that, reduce the risk of cyber attacks, et cetera? I think it's really important from the business side to understand what data is important, right? So what are our priorities? What do we need to track? What data then is important for us to meet those objectives? And then focusing in on that within a tool, within business processes, et cetera. But it gives you a better ability, again, just to stay focused instead of getting lost in the data.
That's great. Can we show the results of the last poll? Okay, folks can take a look at that. And then, Randy, we've talked a lot about the data here. Again, can you, certainly Kahua, has a commitment to it, and from a product set and from understanding how critical the data is. Can you talk a little bit about how real important it is, or the importance of actually the owner owning the data? I think, we've talked in some examples here, but you give us a little bit more, a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think most owner operators are going to want to own the data, but it depends on what type of data. I know that like at Caltrans, they don't store video. That's the data source. What they do is they analyze the video and then running edge computing along that and trying to figure out using modeling to look for certain things, type of cars, the number of cars, the number of vehicles, those types of things. And so they want to have what they call federated requirements. So you have to store the data in the state, or you have federated requirements that require you to store the data in the country or a region. And so there's different requirements from different people, but at the end of the day, it's all about the information that you get from the data. And so I know some agencies store video data like airports, because I think it's legislatively mandated, but a lot don't, because it's very costly. And so why would you store all the data? I think you want the information in a digitized format to run comparisons year after year. I think that's very important for the owners.
That's great. Appreciate that. Nicholas, your thought, again, from your company's perspective, certainly, data is critical. It's a linchpin here. Any thoughts on that, from the kind of extending what, Randy and Sue had just talked about, and Carrie?
Yeah, I'll start with actually Carrie. I was really pleased to see that suite of tools. It was actually my first look at what she's doing there. Kahua is a company made up, it's a project management information system. So most of us have spent our career focused on projects, getting the project done, getting the program complete, a finite amount of time. But we have taken the last 2 years to truly understand the owner's perspective is that they're not creating projects, they're creating assets. And the asset lives a lot longer than the project does. And that asset data is critically important. So I was pleased to see that the work Carrie's doing, a condition assessment is not part of the project. It's something that happens after the project and before the next project. So I'm glad to see it's still that conversation about creating data that can be used throughout the life cycle. I'll sum it up this way. I think most of us have heard the quote from Clive Humby, data is the new oil. I think he said that around the year 2008. Clive Humby, appropriately a British mathematician, data is the new oil. And I thought that was clever when I first heard it, and probably most of us heard the same thing. That's all we heard. And I thought it was clever because data is valuable now. It's more valuable than it's ever been. That's all I thought he meant until I read what he actually said. And his expanded conversation was that data is the new oil. It can be really valuable, but until you get it into a place where you can use it, until you refine it, until you contain it, it's a worthless mess. It's just a problem storing a mess of stuff. And once you, though, can get it in a place that it's usable, once you can refine it, once you can sift and filter through it, then you have something that's really valuable. And I think that sums up what we're saying here. Data is just data, and until somebody gives you the tool to use it well. That's what we're trying to do at Kahua.
Yeah, that's a great that's a great observation. Again, I mean, I think certainly usable. We have a ton of data. What do we do with it, right? How do we prioritize? How do we sift through it? How do we look at it? How do we use it? What's the utility of the data? And I think certainly in this industry, being able to, and I think back to the days when we talked a little bit earlier that we just recreate stuff. If we can't find that file, we just recreate it, or we should start from scratch again. How many times you've gone through a project or a procurement? Oh, I can't find it. I'm going to start all over again. So having that ability to have the platform, to have the technology, have the data available that's extendable, is just tremendous. And I think what I see this is just the beginning, the beginning of greatness here. So we've got a couple minutes left, so I'm going to go around the audience and let me go around the in the panel here and just to close it out. And I'll start with Randy. Any one or two words of advice for the audience today from your experience and kind of this landscape here?
I think change is not easy for any organization. I think it takes a vision from the leadership group. But once you implement these digitized versions of the old project delivery process, you won't go back. I mean, it makes things a lot better, a lot faster, and you're more nimble. And it takes time. Train your employees, make sure they understand why you're making the change. But once you make the change, you wonder why you didn't do it sooner. I can tell you that because at CCTA, we went digitize the project delivery process, and they haven't looked back. And the board is more comfortable. I mean, it is an amazing transformation and modernization effort.
That's great. Carrie, your thoughts?
I mean, I don't think I could say it better than Randy right now.
Great. Sue?
I was thinking the same thing. I mean, just, be ready to make the upfront investment, right? And to stand behind that. And then to use data to have conversations, right? So instead of having the data tell you what decision to make, hopefully it brings stakeholders together. There's transparency and accountability and trustworthiness of that data that people can have some hard conversations and make decisions for the community.
That's great. Nicholas?
My final thought is that I am grateful to have been on a panel with such intelligent and experienced people. So thank you all for letting me be a part. Thanks for everybody that listened in to us today.
That's great. Appreciate that. We do have a couple of questions in the queue. Probably didn't get to, but it is a quick one. Maybe just we got about a minute. Has this program been used with any city transit companies? Any feedback from the audience? I mean, from the panel here.
Been used with many city transit companies. Reach out to Kahua, and we'll be glad to give you more information.
So, folks, we're coming up against it. We're almost done. So, I just want to thank the panel here today. I've been in government a long time, but I'm telling you, I learn stuff every day. And this was a great panel today, a great discussion, such an important piece of government operations and services, to kind of make sure that, we have the right tools, the right platforms, the right approach, the right vendor partners, and right product, to support, government operations and our responsibility to taxpayer. So just closing, just got a couple other slides here. I want to thank Kahua for sponsoring this today. Nicholas, thank you very much. Appreciate it. And panel members, thank you. And I want to thank each and every one of you today and thank the audience for joining us for this most important conversation. Thank you all and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, guys.